From the 5-card PLO course. In today's video, I'm going to go through a session review of hands that I played recently on Stars across the stakes of 3-6 to 10-20. I put together a highlight reel of the most interesting or challenging hands for myself or for someone else involved in the hand where we do get to showdown. And with the help of Odds Oracle, I'm going to run some equity matchups as well as some pre-flop hand rankings analysis in order to get a better understanding of the play that was executed by myself or other players on the table. Let's head into the action here in hand number 1. We can see I'm holding ace, ace, king, king, 6 double suited with a trip suit, so 2 spades and 3 diamonds. And I decided to 3-bet against the MP player sitting right over here. Now we got 2 cold callers from the button and the small blind, and now the small blind pots into the field. We are certainly going to fold here. We have no additional equity or backup apart from our 2 overpairs. But I wanted to look into this hand pre-flop in order to form a stronger opinion about not only this hand, because this hand is definitely going to be very strong, but also different variations of aces. So I'm going to use Odds Oracle. Again, you can buy Odds Oracle at propokertools.com. And I'm going to go into the Range Explorer and start exploring, first of all, ace, ace, king, king, 6. And as I talked about the last time, you are around 50% likely to have a double suited hand. And as we are holding 5 cards, it is impossible to have a rainbow hand, but there's a wide range of double suited strength as well as hands that are single suited, because there are so many possibilities. You can have a middle suit, a high suit, you can have 3 of a suit, 4 of a suit, and so on. So ace, ace, king, 6 here with 2 of a suit and then 3 of a suit is going to be ranked, we'll see it here in any moment, at the top 1%. So it is a very, very strong hand. And once again, aces and kings and just high pairs in general are still the best hands in 5-card PLO. It doesn't change and switch over to the rundowns, even though we have 5 cards that could be working well together. Especially when it comes to the nuttiness potential, we should really favor these high cards, because the dynamic, the meta game right now is that a lot of players are going to enter the pot way too loose, even if we 3-bet, which we're going to see right in this hand in a moment, and therefore nuttiness is really preferable. So the idea of pushing out other players is not so successful right now, and we want to be a little bit careful with it. Now when it comes to aces and we look at a very bad hand like ace, ace, 9, 6 deuce, for example, so a disconnected aces hand, we can see that it ranges here in the 6-handed ranking until the 19th percentile. So definitely a wide range of hands when it comes to 4-card PLO. You will also see that the ace, ace, 7 deuce rainbow is not ranked that high, but that doesn't necessarily mean or talk about the implications of how you want to play a certain hand pre-flop. What I realized about 5-card PLO is that playability is even more important in those 3-bet pots. You need additional equity to justify getting the money in. In 4-card PLO, when you have ace, ace, 7 deuce, even if your hand is rainbow, there's still a lot of board textures where you're able to apply a lot of pressure by just pot size c-betting and basically getting the money in. And that seems to be a pretty bad idea in 5-card PLO, where it's much more likely our opponent will catch a bigger piece of the board. For that reason, when you have the bad aces, I think the implication here for 5-card PLO is that you end up flat calling a lot more often instead of 3-betting. And you should really put a lot of emphasis on how, if your hand is double suited or how connected your hand is, how many additional components you basically have. So let's have a look at this hand here, because we will see some very interesting hands at showdown that I want to analyze in more depth. So all the players are going all in, apart from myself. Again, these 2 guys have been co-calling and he has been raise calling pre-flop. And the reason I'm showing these hands here is also because I want to see how a 5-10 game right now plays in terms of the softness and whether or not we think people are making minor mistakes or potentially very large mistakes. When you think about this hand and you look at these horrendous hands that showdown, specifically the small blinds hand, obviously a single suited sort of disconnected hand or somewhat disconnected hand at least, then we should realize that there is a large amount of edge that is being held here pre-flop if people are entering the pot with a hand like this. Now on the surface level, you might think the equities might be pretty close to each other when you think about the 3-betting range and a cold call or in some random 5-card hand holding. But that's not the whole story, because as we saw on the flop, it is really hard to get away from your hand when you did flop a big piece or a reasonable piece. And he has top 2 and a gutter, which can be easily dominated and is dominated by the buttons range. And that is a result out of the pre-flop mistake. So it's hard to get away from your hand, even more so in 5-card PLO in comparison to 4-card if you make the wrong decision pre-flop. And for that reason, again, it really pays off to stick to nutted hands instead of trying to get involved too loose. So let's have a look at these hands here in order to figure out how they are matching up against a top, let's say 5% 3-betting range, and also just by itself. So we have the button, which has a more interesting hand than the small blind, which is quite trashy, and he has the king of clubs, 8 of spades, 9 of hearts, queen of spades, and 10 of clubs. You will also see if you type in the exact holding, it goes faster when it comes to the rankings. In fact, I've been trying to run through the rankings on my upstairs computer, which is a Mac, which is very powerful, but it did not work, in fact. So I can only utilize 5-card PLO analysis here at the basement, and you also will have to figure this out. Maybe it is because of the Mac version, I'm not sure, but it definitely has sometimes issues when it comes to analyzing like 5-card PLO hand rankings. So here we can see top 7%, so that seems to be pretty encouraging. Now the issue that I see with this hand is when he cold calls the button, it is very likely he's going to be 3-way with the open raiser as well, and the open raiser MP should really have a lot of nutted hands. So we could look at the equity matchup here for sure, but I'm not sure how much it will actually help us. So let's say there's an open raiser and he has around like the top 20% of hands because people play quite loose, and then the 3-better has like a top 5% hand myself. And if you run here the equity matchup, we can see that he has 32% with the king, queen, 10, 9, 8 double suited, 2 suits exactly. But I don't think it reflects necessarily whether or not he wants to get involved. On the one side, you can say he has position, and therefore going for a 32% call, so to speak, is okay and justified. But I think the reality is that the pot will be very large, the SPR will be shallow, and he has a king high suit and a queen high suit, and these suits are much more critical to look at in 5-card PLO in comparison to 4-card PLO, because it's just going to be dominated too often, and you're not going to be able to get away from your hand. So I would be really careful with these kind of hands when the pocket is very large, so just because of the fact of domination. Now, when we look at the open raising hand right over there, we have the ace king 4-6-3. My understanding is that these low connectors do very poor. Of course, ace king double suited is doing great in 4-card PLO, but holding 3 low cards in 5-card doesn't seem to be a justifiable open to me, but let's figure it out. Ace of clubs, king of hearts, 4 of spades, and then we have the 4 of clubs and the 3 of hearts. And this hand is ranked at 15%. And again, if you put that into the picture with playability, potentially facing a 3-bet like it was the case, I don't think this hand is going to do very well. The straight draws and the 2 pairs is going to flop up very marginal. And he will still have to get in the money then on a flop like this one, where he can't be too happy with just the 1 pair and the not flush draw against 2 opponents. Anyway, the money goes in. We could quickly look up this hand, but it's just going to be completely trash. And we move on. But basically, I'm showcasing here that people are willing, even at 5-10, to get involved with marginal hands pre-flop, which will then result into some follow-up mistakes post-flop. And that should be definitely encouraging for us to jump into the pool and play these soft games. You will see some overlapping, by the way, on my end. I'm sorry for that. I was just playing on one screen, and we will see sometimes some overlapping issues here. So now we face an interesting decision similar to the other player before, where we are facing a raise in a 3-bet and we are holding ace, king, queen, jack, 6 double suited. And I was asking myself, should we get involved here? The reason I did end up calling is because the open raiser, when he raise calls or one of these guys is overcalling the 3-bet, I felt like I'm in dominating position with my suits and my pairs and my straight draws that I will be flopping with this hand, but I'm not exactly certain if that is true. Let us just have a look into the Range Explorer to begin with. Now this hand is going to be ranked pretty highly, of course, but that doesn't necessarily matter that much because it's the context that matters here, which is that most likely tight and linear 3-betting range is in front of us. And that will influence the strength of our hand quite a bit. Let's get started here. Ace, queen of clubs, king, jack of spades, and the 6 of spades as well is top 8%, but it's probably one of the hands, once again, that is highly or losing a lot of value when it faces a 5% range. So I'm going to work with 5% here. Again, this is super linear, just 5%. And we are looking here at 40% equity. So not doing great. Another issue is, so we have 40%, right? So that is definitely a justifiable reason to fold. Another problem that we have is on the flop, the open raiser can just check a lot of hands, not necessarily range, but a lot of hands 2 to 3 better. He will then jam a small amount and I have to make a difficult decision with one player or potentially more players behind me. So that can also be an issue here. So I think all in all, we should just fold. Now, if we think this guy's kind of crazy and just 3-bets all sorts of hands, and we give him a 20% range, let's have a look how we are doing right here. So he has a 20% range, the open raiser has a 20% range. We're still not doing hot. I think that is because the top of either player's range is just dominating us so much that we need to get out of the way here. We just don't have a pair, and we have a dangler, and we have 3 of a suit. And although the hand looks kind of nice, it isn't as strong as we might think. I still think the hand is most likely strong enough to actually 3-bet an open raise. That could be the case, but it also has some benefits when it comes to flatting. Maybe lastly, let's have a quick look into how we're performing against aces, or let's say the top 3%. Yeah, so we lose a lot of value quickly, like 37 now, and then, well, against aces, we're not going to do that bad, but against really strong aces, we are going to do bad. So let's say he has double suited aces, 36, close to 37%. Yeah, okay. Now notice that double suited aces will also have some spades here quite often and then dominate us in that way as well. So now here we have the problem. He jams the flop and we only have one pair, no backdoor flush draw. We will have to make the fold. Also because against aces, we are just completely screwed. And the money goes in. We are looking at a king, king, 10, 10, 4, a single suited, and also at a double suited with a trip suit, queen, 9, 8, 8, 7. So those are some interesting holdings. Kind of reminds me of 4-card PLO, right? King, king, 4, 4 should be okay in my estimation, but the hand is single suited. We're looking at a range here from 3 to 15. That obviously refers to some really bad suits, but if we say we have a single suited hand, so like this, and the X is the king, then we are looking at the king 10 is an X. Okay, so we're looking at a top 10% hand, probably more on the marginal side to open under the gun. We also don't block aces, have bad connectivity, and also are not double suited. Again, most hands are double suited. If we are increasing the value here by saying we have a double suited hand, then we are looking at a 3 to 5% holding. So much, much stronger double suited, probably a fold single suited. Now I doubt that this is a 3-bet, by the way. Here the queen, 9, 8, 8, 7. I think this seems to be a concept, like the pushing concept, that is not holding as true in 5-card, or you need a better standard to justify doing it. If your hand, it has no pair, is better connected, I could see how it is a thing. But with queen, heart, 9 heart, 8 heart, 8 diamond, 7 diamond, I don't think this hand will really make the cut. 32% seems to be a very weak holding here. If we compare that with a hand that has better connectivity and is double suited as well, then we're looking at a 7 to 13% hand here with queen, jack, 10, 9, 8. I think this hand double suited makes a lot more sense. And it seems to be really easy to pick up a lot of these hands and then 3-bet all of them, because you do get a double suited hand so frequently. And when you start including like all these gaps into your 3-betting range, you will just come up with tons of 3-bets and you're going to be susceptible to 4-bets quite a lot. So be careful not overvaluing double suited, somewhat connected hands. I know that this hand, if it is a 4-card PLO hand, let's say we have the unpaired queen 8, 9, 7 double suited, we could easily 3-bet, but it really changes a ton when it comes to 5-card PLO. So all the money goes in. It's kind of interesting because it's only a 3-way flop, but on the flop, you will see here just in a moment that this player gets it in with 15% equity. And I really don't think that this is a rare situation where the queen high trip suit and 8 high two suit hand in a three-way pot gets it in really bad post flop. Because it is so easy to have a double suited hand, I think this hand will be dominated very, very often. You got to be careful not overvaluing the hand. Now he does make the backdoor straight and wins this one, but seems to be one of those typical hands that we are overvaluing quickly if we come from a 4-card background, which almost all of us will, playing 5 cards. Double suited ace, queen, 7-3-5. I talked about the low suits before, but given the fact that I am double suited and I have some high suits here, ace high suit and queen high suit, I think we have a defend. I talked about the low cards here, the 7-3-5, which are very badly ranked in 5 card before, but against one player I decided to defend. Quick look into the hand pre, and you guys let me know if this is too much of a pre-flop hand ranking analysis, and I will tone it down, but I do think it is really the starting point of understanding the game on a better level. Okay, so here we are looking at an 18% hand, seems to be very reasonable defend. If this hand would be single suited, I don't think we should defend here. I mean, with a nut suit, we are at the 38th percentile with exactly 2 of a suit in a nut suit, and then 69 with obviously some weaker suits. So could probably be a defend with a nut suit. Flop comes now 8-5 deuce with 2 spades, and we have a lot of blockers here. We have, first of all, 2 spades, which are blocking the nut flush draw, of course, the best draws possible here. But also we have a 5 and a gutter, and that makes it a lot likelier that he's going to check back when we check ourselves. Now, if we check and he checks as well, there aren't really that many great turn cards because the straight draw we are holding is not so nutted, and also the 2 pair outs we're making, they are not that great, especially when you think about river run outs. There are the backdoor clubs on board, and then also all these straight draws that my opponent can have to leaning towards the river. So I decided to lead the flop here. Oh, I actually didn't lead the flop, and that is surprising to me. I think I should lead the flop because we are blocking our opponent's range heavily. So in 4-card PLO, if you think about our hand and you disregard, let's say, the queen of diamonds in our hand, we have a very strong holding that can definitely justify check raising and going for stacks. And in this situation, I did check raise as well. And it's very possible that we do have a check raise, a justifiable check raise. But what basically ended up happening is that all the money goes in, and we will see here in a second that he has the ace 8, ace 6. So top set basically with a backdoor flush draw, blocking the straight with a 6 of spades as well. And I remember that we had very poor equity against this hand, maybe like 33% or so. Ended up losing the whole pot. And I want to dive into a little bit of a deeper analysis to see if we did overvalue our hand, and in which case, let's say that we think our hand isn't that strong. It even speaks more about the fact that we should lead into our opponent. And if he raises, we are just going to call. But we lead basically to deny equity and opportunities and build a pot in case we hit the nut flush. But let's dive deeper into this hand to see whether or not our hand is strong enough to justify check raising. So here we are looking at an equity matchup between our middle pair gut shot in nut flush draw versus some reasonable value hands, sets, top 2 pairs, flush draws with backdoor flush draws or with straight draws, so basically combo draws. And we are running around 50% equity. So our hand is probably strong enough to go for a check raise given that analysis, but the question really is, what prefers a check raise versus a lead? And I think in this instance we clearly want to lead, and that is because we have marginal showdown value, and given the blockers in our hand, there's a high likelihood that our opponent is just going to fold and give up equity with some overpairs, for example, that don't have enough additional components to justify flat in the flop. Specifically in 5-card PLO, where you have more information about your hand, given that we have one additional card, it is important to utilize that information to our advantage. And I think leading in multi-way pots or from the big blind against a single raiser is even more important given that additional information in comparison to 4-card PLO. Therefore, I prefer leading the flop here, going big and trying to make our opponent fold. If we do get raised for pot, most likely, I would just call because we're going to still be behind against a lot of the sets our opponents will have, as well as 2 pairs with flush draws that are blocking our flush draw, and have a look at some turn cards. So this wraps up part number 1 of the session review. I hope you guys enjoyed this format. Let me know in the comments below what kind of open questions you have and what your feedback is on the length and the format of this video. I'm looking forward to adjust down the road to make this as helpful as possible to you guys and have a nice experience for all of us, diving deeper into 5-card PLO and generating some very nice edges while staying ahead of the curve. See each other in part number 2 of the session review. Until then, Fernando, aka JNandis87, over and out for the PLO Mastermind.